Namaste and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So nice to see you. I see some familiar faces. Always nice to gather like this. Thank you also for joining us. This is a bit of a later hour than many of our programs tend to be, but we're so appreciative and so encouraged to see this group of curious, inquisitive souls gathering together this evening. I know some of you and others are new friends. So whether you are a Hindu Life Program regular or newer to our gatherings, welcome or welcome back. My name is Vineet Chander. I serve as the Assistant Dean for Hindu Life at Princeton University and Director of the Hindu Life Program, the hosts of this evening's talk. This evening, we are honored and delighted to have with us Mr. Jayant Kapatker, a graduate from the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur. Jayant ji has almost 30 years of entrepreneurship and experience in the fields of computing, engineering, security and cybersecurity, finance and marketing. He worked in India, Nepal, Spain, Australia, and the United States. And in that capacity, Jayant developed and established a wide range of online training courses on security technology. More than 15,000 students from more than 60 countries have completed these courses. And his CCTV online training course, a course that he pioneered and designed, won the Judges' Choice Award at the International Security Conference in Las Vegas. Of course, Jayant's professional success is only a very small part of his story. And in one sense, that's the part of his story we're not going to be drawing from so much this evening. Rather, we would like to focus on another aspect of Jayant's life and passion. Starting in 2005, he embarked on a deep study of Hinduism's Vedanta tradition, particularly in the Advaitin lineage of Adi Shankaracharya. At the Arshabodha Center here in New Jersey, which is a center that I think is known and loved by some of us on the call, he was mentored by the respected teacher Swami Tadatmanandaji. Under Swamiji's guidance, Jayant studied texts such as the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Shankaracharya's Viveka Chudamani, and the principal Upanishads, among other scriptures. Along with this text study, he also learned and engaged in and continues to engage in rigorous meditation practice. Beginning in the year 2014, Jayantji began to write articles seeking to establish a direct connection between science and Vedanta, and hosted a very well-loved blog site with these articles and posts on this subject. Over the years, his articles and posts struck a chord with audiences, both local and global. And encouraged by the response to these articles, earlier this year, Jayant published his full-length book, Science Meets Vedanta, from which he will draw in this evening's talk. Formerly residents of Princeton Junction, Jayant and his wife Maya now live in Pune, India. Friends, Jayant will present for about 45 minutes or so, and then we hope to transition into some space for comments, clarifications, and questions and answers. We ask that you make sure you remain muted. You can keep your cameras on or off as you feel comfortable, but we want to minimize on those audio distractions. So please take a moment now to just make sure that you are and stay muted. And in the interest of streamlining things and getting as many questions in as we can, please do send me your questions or comments ahead of time in the chat box. You can directly chat them to me, and let me know if you'd like for me to ask the question on your behalf. I can do that. If you'd like me to ask the question anonymously, I can do that. Or if you'd like to ask the question yourself, we can please let us know that, and we can have you go ahead and unmute yourself and do that. but we do ask that all questions or comments be written out ahead of time and sent to me in the chat box. So with that bit of introduction and housekeeping, I am now so happy to turn things over to Jayant ji for tonight's, I'm sure, really enlightening and thought-provoking talk. Jayant, over to you.
Thank you, Vineet. Thanks a lot for the introduction, and thanks a lot for organizing this webinar today. So let me go and share my screen. Good day, everyone. My name is Jayant Kapatker. As Vineet mentioned, I'm currently living in Pune in India. So today's topic is observing the observed, where Vedanta meets quantum physics. Or some might say it should be the other way around. It should be where quantum physics meets Vedanta. If you really look around, you will see that science and Vedanta are looking for the same reality. Science is looking out for the reality out there. They have been smashing particles in different particle accelerators all around the world to find the substratum of all the objects in this universe. They're also trying to find the theory of everything and the unification of forces. So the objective of science is also to find the underlying reality, one single reality from which everything in this universe comes out. And Vedanta also are looking for the same reality, but they're looking in a different place. They're looking at inside you or in here. So the rishis, the ancient rishis in India, they shut their eyes, they looked inwards, and they try to discover the inner core of each person there. And they did find the inner core. So basically, there has to be only one reality. Out there and in there must be part of the same reality. You cannot have two different realities. So in a way, both Vedanta and science are looking for the same reality there. In this talk, we will try to show how science and Vedanta are interconnected in many different ways. To get the ball rolling, let's understand the term observing the observed. If you're a student of quantum physics, you would be familiar with this term called observing system and observed system. Observing system is something which is being which observes things outside, and observed system is something which is being observed. This is a terminology which is used in quantum physics, and we will discuss this term shortly. And in Vedanta, you have terms like observer and observed. The technical term used in Vedanta for observer is sakshi, which is the witness, the subject, and the observed. You have terms like prakriti, which is nature, and all the different objects which are available in the universe. So if you look at these two terms, for any layman, they would say they look exactly the same. Observing system, observed system, observer, observed. A lawyer might say this is an open and shut case. So they both are very exactly the same. But unfortunately, quantum physics use this terminology, but they do not understand fully the implication of these terms. And also they do not have the exposure to Vedanta to understand the underlying reality of these terms, basically. And for students in Vedanta, they also do not make this connection because they do not have the full understanding of quantum physics. So today, I will try my best to show both these terms are exactly the same. Both quantum physics and Vedanta, they mean exactly, they have the same sort of terminologies, which are exactly the underlying reality of both of them is exactly the same. So what we want to do first is to give you a brief overview of quantum physics. If some people are not familiar with quantum physics, then I will give you a brief overview of Vedanta to show these terms, what exactly they mean, and then we'll see if we can make the connection between these two. So let's get going. History of physics. The history of physics can be divided into two distinct phases. One is the classical physics and the quantum physics. The classical physics is what we really studied in our school and colleges. It is and Newton is supposed to be, Newton and his laws of motion is the heart of classical physics. And when Newton discovered the three laws of motion, and which are still relevant today, they felt that they knew the universe completely because they knew the motion, they knew the forces, they knew exactly how these celestial bodies moved around. They felt like the universe is a giant machine, and they knew the motion, the forces of these machines, and everything is predictable. So they could see what will happen in 10 years' time. Where would that star be? Where would that motion be? So they felt it's like a big machine there. But things changed dramatically in the beginning of the 20th century when they started discovering the subatomic particles. They found that these subatomic particles like photons, protons, electrons, they sometimes behave like wave and sometimes they behave like particle there. And all the classical laws which were relevant did not apply to the subatomic particles. So completely a new science started off with quantum physics as such. So let's give a brief overview of quantum physics to give you familiarize where we are in quantum physics. Not going into too much detail, just an overview. In 1805, Thomas Young, he conducted an experiment called the double slit experiment. In this double slit experiment, you had a light source. In front of the light source, you had a barrier. In the barrier, you had two different slits, like you see in this diagram. And behind this barrier, you had a photographic plate, which the lights would hit the photographic plate to see which exactly location you would hit. So logically, when you see these two slits and you have a light source focusing on those two slits, you would expect the light source to go from either one of the slits or the second slit there. And logically, you would have found two different bands on the photographic plate from the two different slits. Because there are two slits, you would have expected two bands on the photographic plate. But to this, Thomas Young's amazement, he found multiple bands on the photographic plate. And that, when they investigated that, they found light is a wave, because the wave went through the two different slits, they split in the two different slits, and when they came the other side, they combined, had crests and peaks, and then they traveled across to the photographic plate. It had multiple bands there. Like you see, in this case, there are 5 different bands there. So that they felt that light was a wave, because the wave properties were going through the different two slits, and they combined and they created 5 different bands, not the 2 bands they expected. If it was a particle, you would have only had got 2 different bands on the photographic plate, but they saw multiple bands there. So they thought light is a wave, basically. They found that light is a wave. Then in 1905, Einstein, in his famous experiment called the photoelectric experiment, he tried to show that light is a particle, basically. And he won the Nobel Prize for this particular discovery. Although Einstein is more famous for his theory of relativity, the theory of the special relativity, and the general relativity, but he won the Nobel Prize for this particular experiment. In this experiment, what he did was he had a metal plate, which is made a photoelectric metal plate, and he put light towards those that metal photographic plate. And this light source, when it hit the metal plate, it interacted with the atoms there, and it let loose some electrons and photons out from this metal plate. And that was zooming out, basically, like a reflection out of that rays. And he found out those, what was being reflected out was packets of energy, photons or packets of energy. And he came to the conclusion that light is a particle here. So we just saw that light is a wave and light is a particle. So this was a confusion, and that's what gave the birth to quantum physics as such. What it is it a light? Is it really a particle, or is it a wave? Then in 1923, de Broglie, he is a French scientist, and he wrote a doctoral thesis in which he mentioned that matter is both wave and particle. We just saw light has both wave properties and particle properties. But he mentioned that everything in the universe has a wave property and a particle property. And this was experimentally proven in 1927, and he won the Nobel Prize in 1929. He's the only scientist who won a Nobel Prize based on his doctoral thesis as such. And so everything in the universe has a wave property and a particle. You, me, the car, the house, the trees, the subatomic particles, the universe, the planets, everything in the universe has a particle property and a wave property. But unfortunately, science has been only focusing on the particle part of this particle part, basically. They do not focus so much on the wave part of it. That's very unfortunate. And that's one of the reasons why we are having this discussion out here today. Now, for example, now, if you look at a tree outside your window, there's a tree outside. you would say that is a particle basically. Now, if you put your face the other way around and you're not looking at the tree, what would that tree be? Would that tree be a particle or would that be a wave? You cannot be sure it's a particle because you're not seeing the tree. When you see the tree, you're 100% sure it's a particle there. So if you're not looking at the tree, what is it? Is that tree a wave or is it a particle? It's definitely not a particle because you cannot confirm that. For example, another example to give, if you're sitting with your friend in a room and you're talking to each other, and then you move out of the room and you go to the next room, and you obviously don't see your friend in front of you because you are in the other room. Do you think your friend is a wave or is a particle there? So you come back to your room and ask him, I just went out. During the duration, were you a wave or were you a particle there? Your friend will look in amazement. He'll say, no, of course I was a particle. Then he may ask the same question to you. You went to the other room. I didn't see you. Were you a wave there or were you a particle there? So these are some of the very interesting questions which come up when you try to discuss wave and particle duality as such. So one thing you can see when a wave and when a particle, one thing becomes quite clear. To be a particle, you need to have an observer. So the observer can confirm that you are a particle basically. So wave needs a observer to collapse the wave to become a particle there. Can there be a wave and a particle at the same time? That's a very interesting question. I'm not able to 100% confirm that, but I feel you can either be a wave or a particle. So once you see something, you're a particle, and something when you don't see, it is a wave. Then the question which is very interesting is, where does a wave reside? So when you turn your back from the tree, you are not looking at the tree. How do you confirm where is that tree at the moment? Is it there? Because you can't confirm that because you're not looking at the tree. So if it is a wave, so where is that wave of that tree there? These are some of the questions which are very important. And unfortunately, science doesn't focus on this part of the wave part of it, the duality there. They're focusing on the particle part. They're investigating the particles. They're finding the substratum of these particles. But there is a wave part of everything. Like de Broglie said in his thesis, that everything in the universe must have a wave property. But where does the wave property reside? That's a very interesting question. And we will try to answer that question as we move along. Then came Schrödinger's wave equation. This is the heart of quantum physics, the technical part of the quantum physics. Like Newton had the 3 laws of motion, the equations, the technical part of the equations. The Schrödinger is similar, is the heart of the quantum physics. It gives you a representation of the wave part of the particle wave duality. So it's an equation which Schrödinger discovered, and it represents the wave part of the particle wave duality. It represents all objects, simple objects, complex objects. Simple objects, they have able to find the exact equation, what the equation means, like for subatomic particles like electrons and photons. But complex objects, they are very complex, so they're not able to find the exact equation which will represent those things. But every object in this universe, the wave part must be represented by a quantum, by Schrödinger's wave equation. Schrödinger also mentioned that his equation is a physical system. It consists of 2 parts. It consists of an observed system and observing system. And it has 2 different variables, energy variable and a time variable. So these are the 2 parts of the quantum physics. It must have an observed system and observing system as part of the Schrödinger's wave equation. So we'll try to discuss these 2 parts now, the observed system and the observing system. The observed system represents the wave part of the particle wave duality. So we mentioned that every object has a wave part and a particle part. The Schrödinger's equation represents the wave part of this duality as such. And each object has its own unique energy profile. The exact profile, they're not able to ascertain for major complex objects, but they must be having a wave function which has the which represents that particular object. So it's the cumulative energy function over time. For example, the sun is about 4.5 billion light years old now. So each moment of the sun has its own energy profile as such, basically. So when the sun was born, it has its own energy profile for that particular time. Then as the sun started growing and getting older, so each moment of the sun has its own energy profile basically. And the cumulative grand function of the sun is represented by this object, by this Schrödinger's wave equation. And the future suns also, as and when the time passes, so every moment of the sun has its own energy function, and the grand function of the sun is the cumulative of all this time period, covers the full time period as such. Another very interesting part of the observed system is that it must be a standing wave basically. So there are basically two different types of waves. One is a standing wave and one is a traveling wave. The traveling wave is quite simple to understand. If you throw a stone in a pond and you see the wave being formed and they keep moving along, they think there's no edge to it. It keeps moving onward sort of thing. But a standing wave, as it stands, as the name stands, it has two different walls, and the wave function functions between those two walls as such. They keep bouncing between those two walls. So the Schrödinger's wave equation mentions that the thing must be a standing wave. Then Schrödinger's also had a thing called the probability wave function. If you square this Schrödinger's wave equation without being too technical, you get a probability wave function. And this probability wave function has all the possibilities available in the wave function as such. It can take root of many different possibilities. The example given is the Schrödinger's cat experiment. It's a thought experiment which was done by Schrödinger, in which you have a cat in a box. In that box, which is closed, there has a trap door on which you can peep inside to see what the cat is doing. In that, there's a atomic trigger, and this atomic trigger randomly can trigger or on and off basically randomly. And if it triggers on, it can break a poison bottle, and which breaks the bottle, the poison will come out and the cat will die. So that was a thought experiment which was created by Schrödinger's equation. The idea being that it has all the different possibilities, because if the trap door is closed and you are not able to look inside, you're not sure what's the status of the cat inside in the box there. It could be dead, it could be alive, and the possibilities also are there. It could be 1/3 dead, 2/3 alive, or 2/3 dead, 1/3 alive. All the different proportions are possible, although they may not be logical, but it is possible to have all the different states of the in the wave function inside. So that's what it shows, that it's a wave function, and all the different possibilities are within that wave function as such. So now, to make sure the cat is alive or dead, you need to have an observing system. So the observing system will also is a physical part of the physical system. It's like a measuring device. When you open the trap door, you look inside, and then you can confirm then if either dead or alive. When it's dead or alive, if for example it's alive, all the other possibilities which are in the wave function will collapse, and you only have one possibility, that is the cat was alive. So the other possibilities are all zero then. So only one possibility, which is 1, which is the cat was alive. And in case the cat was dead, that possibility is 1, and all the other possibilities are 0 basically. So that's what the Schrödinger's wave function and the observing system works within the quantum physics as such. There's only one logical possibility who takes hold. The probability of other becomes 0 as such. So you notice something out here. This, if there's an observing system and the observing system doesn't open the trapdoor or doesn't make the measurement, the wave function will always remain a wave only. It will never become a particle there. So if there was no observing system, you only would have waves basically. And once you have the observing system interacting with the observed system, then you have only a particle coming up. So did you notice something, that wave has to come first, then the particle comes. So the wave function is always a wave, and once the observing system interacts with the wave, then it becomes a particle. So it's very important to understand that the wave always comes first, then the particle. This has many different profound implications in the way you look at the universe as such. For example, now, when you're trying to do a perception process, we are trying to see objects out here. What does science teach us? Science teaches there are objects outside in the world which are particle, and then that hits the retina, and then goes into your brain, and that's a wave inside there. So it's trying to tell you that the particle comes first, and then the wave comes. But we just shown that the wave has to come first, and then you have the particle. Basically, you need an observing system which will collapse the wave to become a particle. It's not the other way around. So the way we think about the universe can be quite different from what actually is happening there. So these are some of the implications you can see, that the wave must come first, then you have a particle there. That's a very important concept to remember and think about as such. So there are many unanswered questions which the Schrödinger's wave equation are there. For example, the standing wave. Where are the walls for the wave there? So we're thinking the waves, as per science, they think the wave is outside in the universe there. So where is the wave for the walls for the waves outside there? We think the waves are hanging around in the universe there. You might say that the atom waves are within the molecule as such. And then you might say the molecule wave is within the complex volume, complex structure of molecules basically. And the complex molecule structure is within a more complex molecule structure. And as you keep going outwards, and then it covers the different objects, the waves of different objects, and then different complex objects, a series of objects. And then finally, you have to have the universe as the final goal, where you have all the waves within the wall. And where is the wall for the universal wave with the cosmic wave, basically? So you will not find standing waves out there, basically. The other important thing of waves is there needs a propagation medium. Like, so we know that sound, for sound to travel, you need air as a propagation medium. For light or waves to travel in the universe out there, it needs some sort of propagation medium. So scientists always thought there is some sort of ether out in space on which light and other things travel as such. But till date, they haven't found, and in fact, they have come to the conclusion there is no ether out there. So if there's no ether out there, how do the wave travel in the universe out there? If this says it's a wave function which is out in the universe out there. The next question is, what are these waves made of? They must be made of something, because they exist. Because as per the theory of what De Broglie mentioned, everything in the universe must have a wave property. So they exist. So what are they made of? And lastly, next question is very important, and a critical question is, where do the wave reside? It's not in the particle. It cannot be inside the particle, because we just saw that the wave function becomes a particle there. So it doesn't exist as such. Only the wave becomes a particle there. So it cannot exist within the particle. So where does the wave exist? That's the most, I think, critical questions. It's a $64 million question, which to understand where does the wave reside. And like I mentioned to you, science has not shown much curiosity to understand where the wave function resides. And lastly, how does a matter collapse a wave? What power does the matter have? For example, we saw in the double slit experiment that when the wave hits the photographic plate, it collapses to become a particle. What power does that photographic plate have to collapse a wave? If you look at the photographic plate itself is matter, it also has a what you call wave property and a particle property. So what part of that photographic plate has the power to collapse a wave? This again is not very clear, not very well explained by science as such. I think we've got a good grounding for what science has been talking. Quantum physics is talking about the wave property of the observed and observed functions. So let's go to now Vedanta. How does Vedanta look at this issue as such? So who's the observer? We'll try to give you a Vedanta perspective as such. To understand the observer, we need to understand our inner core as such, as taught by Vedanta. Vedanta says our innermost core is Sat, Chit, Ananda. So we need to understand this term to understand what exactly the observer is. So very important to understand our inner core. Our inner core is Sat. Sat is a technical word. In Sanskrit, it means real. This is not the real which we talk about in our day-to-day language. This real really means that it is the same, unchanging over 3 tenses. It doesn't change in the past. It doesn't change now. It will never change in the future. And that is what real means. If you look around in the universe, you will not find anything which is real. Even this universe started 13.7 billion light years away. Before that time period, there was no universe as such. So it doesn't meet the definition of Sat, because it was not existing before 13.7 billion light years. It may not exist after some more billion light years in the future. So this universe out there cannot be Sat. So there's something inside you which is Sat, which is real, which is unchanging, which is uncaused, which is uncreated. So that Sat is inside you, which is your innermost core. And the nature of this Sat, it is radiating awareness. It is called Chit, which is awareness. Some people also define this as consciousness, but I like to use the definition of awareness. And this Sat nature also is Ananda. Ananda means bliss or happiness. So it's not momentary happiness you get by, for example, if you win a lottery, you have that happiness, or if you eat some good food, you get a momentary happiness. That's not what we're talking about, that momentary happiness. We're talking the nature of your Sat, which is the only thing which is real, is this inner core is happiness. It is. So what you want to do now is to discuss and understand this awareness part of it, because it's very important to understand what exactly this awareness means. Understanding Chit or awareness. This equation out here, to understand awareness, we need to understand experiences there. We all know we have all experiences in our mind. We have a continuous source of experiences every day. There's not a single moment during waking time when you don't have an experience there. And we all know that experiences can happen in the mind only. So the connection to the universe is only through your mind. Whatever you experience in your mind is your only connection to the universe as such. It's a fact that each one of us are aware of all experiences in the mind. You can never say that I had an experience and I'm not aware of it. So experience, you must, if you have experience, you must be aware of it there. So the ingredient of any experience is awareness. So awareness is the basic ingredient of experiences. So if you think of an experience, it is made up of awareness as such. If you didn't have awareness, you would not have any experience as such. And the forms are then superimposed on the awareness to complete the experience. So the equation which we have is experience is equal to awareness plus form. And the form comes from the 5 different senses. It could come from your eyes, it could come from your ears, it comes from your nose, taste. All these forms are superimposed on this awareness. And once it's superimposed on the awareness, we have experience as such. So the form keeps changing, so experience keeps changing, but the awareness remains the same. We have the same awareness is always there in your mind. So the question can be asked, do everyone have the same awareness? You have an awareness, I have awareness of my experiences. Are the awareness the same? According to Vedanta, the awareness is same in each of our minds. Every mind in this universe, every living being is aware of their experiences, and that awareness which is in the mind is the same for everyone. So the topic of our discussion is not getting into those details, but try to understand what exactly you mean by awareness. So let's analyze awareness in a little bit more detail. Awareness has to have 3 different ingredients. It's just like water has oxygen and hydrogen and H2O. That's what water is made of. The same way, awareness must have these 3 ingredients. It must have a subject, it must have intelligence, and must have an object, basically. Let's try to understand this. Awareness must have a subject who's aware of the experience. The subject is the knower of the awareness as such. The awareness must have an object, which is experience. This object is the known part of awareness as such. And then there must be intelligence by which the subject gets connected to know the object. So the intelligence is the knowing part of awareness. So the subject, objects, and intelligence are 3 ingredients of awareness there. It is not something which is hanging out in the universe there. It is part of awareness. For example, now if you're listening to my talk, that listening part has 3, if you're aware of my talk, it must have the 3 ingredients. There's a subject within you, which is aware of my talk. There is an object, which is my talk coming to you. And there is intelligence, which is decoding the talk to make you understand the subject, to understand what I'm talking about. So there'll be no awareness if any one of this is missing. For example, if you have a subject, but there are no objects out there, you will not have awareness. Or the other way around, if you have all the objects around the world, but there is no subject to see the objects, you will not have any awareness as such. And lastly, if you have a subject and object, but they don't know each other, there's no intelligence which is connecting the two, you will not have awareness. So awareness must have the subject, object, and intelligence. So that's a basic thing. This awareness is like a bulb of awareness, which is your inner core, which is radiating awareness as such. And this awareness must have a subject, observer. It must have the object, observed, and it must have the intelligence there. It has three major powers there. The power of the subject is called the power of the knower, which is the observer, by which the subject can understand what the object we are seeing. Then there's a power of known, which is to become any object as such. And there's a power of knowing, which decodes the object and to let the subject know what the object is there. So these are three different powers which are within awareness. These are not simple powers which are hanging around there. They're part of this awareness. This awareness is the most underlying force in this universe as such. It's very important to understand this power of awareness, which has the power of knower, power of known, and the power of knowing. The subject is the observer within awareness as such. When you see the tree, who is seeing the tree? When you listen to music, who's listening to the music? When you taste a chocolate, of a sweetness of chocolate, who is tasting the chocolate? So the observer, which is part of awareness, has this power by which when he sees the tree, it is a seer of the tree because it is seeing the tree basically. When he's listening to music, it is the listener of the music there. When he's tasting the chocolate, it is the taster of the chocolate. So you can see that the observer has different roles it plays. For example, when you're talking, you're the talker of the subject is the talker of that part. And now if you're understanding some issue, you are the understander. The subject is the understander, or the observer is the understander. So this the power of knower and the power of the observer are interlinked. So the observer has the power of the knower by which it can understand what's going out within the awareness as such. So observed, now observed is, we just talked about the observer. Now we'll talk about the observed part of it, the object part of it. There are objects in the mind, mental waves or vrittis. This is what taught by Vedanta. All the objects in the mind are mental waves or vrittis or whirlpool. Vritti means whirlpool in the mind. So every object you see must have a vritti in the mind there. And the vrittis are coming from all the 5 different senses. It could come through your eyes, through your nose, through your taste of tongue. It could come through your nose, the smell part, and the feeling part through your skin and those other parts. So the vrittis are coming through these different senses into your mind basically. And once it comes to the mind, these are mental waves which are in the mind. And these vrittis are made out of intelligence. Why are they made of intelligence? Because we are seeing that your mind is full of awareness as such. Once they can, these vrittis get in touch with this awareness, it has the intelligence within the awareness, and that it passes that intelligence to the to these vrittis. So the vrittis are made of intelligence basically. So each vritti of an object knows exactly what it stands for because it is intelligent, it's self-knowing what these objects stand for as such. So there's your mind, there's a cosmic wave function. So each object in the universe has its vrittis there in the mind. And so if you've seen this diagram there, there's a vritti of the sun, there's a vritti of the tree, a vritti of the cars, people, houses, everything in the universe has a vritti, and they combine together to form a cosmic wave function. So you may ask, if we have one wave function, how does a sun keeps its own independent understanding that this is a sun? Like I mentioned, each vritti, they combine to form a cosmic wave function, but they keep their independence because the vrittis are made of intelligence. They know exactly what each vritti stands for. And when they combine together, like for example, when you look out of your window, you see a complex scene there. You see trees, you see grass, you see birds, you see everything which is forms of one single vritti in your mind. And each vritti within it has its own independence as such. So this cosmic wave function, the subset of this cosmic wave function is seen by individual mind. So each mind takes a part of this cosmic wave function, and which is in the individual mind, and the individual mind sees that wave function as such. So the observed and the power of known. We mentioned earlier that the power of known is a power within awareness as such. To understand this is something like a Play-Doh, which we use when we are kids. We have a Play-Doh, lump of Play-Doh. You can make the Play-Doh into any particular object. You can make a Play-Doh into a car. You can make a Play-Doh into a house. You can transform the Play-Doh into any particular object as such. The same way, the awareness can be transformed into any particular object. That the awareness is formless, so it can be manipulated to form any particular object as such. And that object formation is by the power of known. The power of known is to become particular object. So when the vritti of a car comes through the eyes into the mind, the power of known puts the DNA of that car into the thing. So the creation of the car object is given by the power of known to the vritti which is coming from the mind, so that the car knows, the vritti knows that it is a car of red color, and all the different things which the car has, the properties are coming through the power of known as such. So the observed and the observer all are part of awareness, and we've seen that awareness has a very powerful force as such. So now, how does the wave collapse from the Vedanta perspective? We saw what happens from the perspective of quantum physics. In Vedanta, the observed function is the awareness. The vrittis are coming in the mind through the five senses. When the awareness fills up the vritti with awareness, the wave collapses. So collapsing of wave really means that when the object vritti connects with the awareness, you become aware. And that awareness comes from the power of your innermost core, which is within your mind as such. So the collapsing of wave in the mind really happens in the presence of awareness as such. And when any object in the mind comes in the presence of the mind, it collapses to become an object which you see outside as such. So you notice again here, the wave part comes first. This wave collapses in the presence of the observer to be a particle. This is how Vedanta teaches us how objects are formed there. So you see the process is very similar to what quantum physics is teaching. You have an observed system and you have an observing system. So the observed system is the wave, and the observing system is the measurement device. And when the measurement devices interacts with the observed system, it collapses to become a wave. So you see the same sort of logic and principles are used by Vedanta as such. With this understanding now, let's try to answer some of the questions which came up. Correlating quantum physics and Vedanta. We saw the standing waves. Where are the walls for the wave? We saw that there are no walls of the standing waves outside. So the only location where the waves can be is within the mind, basically. And the mind has the waves are within the mind, and the mind is the two walls of the standing waves as such. So all the waves are oscillating within the mind itself. There are no waves out there in the world, in the universe out there. The waves have to be within the mind itself. So what is a propagation medium? Waves need a propagation medium. There are none in the space out there. Science has proven that. So how does the wave propagate itself? Mind is the only location where you have waves as such, where the waves can propagate. And we've just seen that awareness in the mind is the propagation medium. And the waves interact with this awareness to become particles as such. What are waves made of? I think you can answer this question straight away. Awareness is available in the mind. Intelligence is part of awareness. Waves in the mind are made of this intelligence as such. So the waves in the mind is what the intelligence is what the ingredients of every wave which are made of. The waves are made of intelligence, of knowledge. It has the knowledge of that particular object, and that's what the waves are made of as such. So where do the waves reside? It doesn't reside, waves come first, then the particles. Wave cannot reside in the particle. Waves can reside in the mind only. So mind is the place where all the waves reside. Now, taking the example of this, double slit experiment we showed earlier. So the full double slit experiment which was conducted, that also has a wave property. And everything of that wave property is within the mind. And when you see the experiment taking place, wave collapses in the presence of awareness to create that double slit experiment as such. So everything must reside in the mind itself. Can a matter collapse the wave? We have seen that quantum physics teaches that the measuring device collapses the matter as such. But then in this particular experiment, the photographic plate collapses the wave as such. But the photographic plate itself is made of matter. It is also has a wave property. It has a particle property. Then you might say the brain collapses the wave function as such. Then the brain also has a particle property and a wave property. So what really collapses the wave is your awareness within your mind, which collapses the wave. So the final ultimate place where the collapsing of mind of the wave takes place is within the mind itself. So now to understand, to summarize, we mentioned there are two different aspects of physics. One is the classical physics and one is the quantum physics there. So we see that if you understand now that the quantum physics is talking about the mind, it's talking about the vrittis in the mind. So the quantum physics actually is the science of the waves in the mind as such. The Schrödinger's equation would represent all the waves which are in the mind as such. And the classical physics is the science which covers the objects in the space out there, the objects which are in the space. That's what classical physics covers there. So classical physics, when you say that the laws of quantum physics don't apply to classical physics and the laws of classical physics do not apply to quantum physics, that's because they're operating in totally different domains. The classical physics is acting in the domain of particles, which is in the space out there. And the quantum physics is acting in the domain of the mind, which is in the subtle object universe, which is within you as such. So it's quite a profound statement to make that the quantum physics is really the science of the mind, the vrittis in the mind. This is quite a profound statement, but I feel that's the only place and logical place where the subtle waves, the wave function operate there. So like I mentioned, the science is not really focusing on the wave part of it. They're focusing on the classical part of it, classical physics or the objects as such. They are trying to understand the wave part of it, but they need to understand the wave part can only happen in the mind. It cannot happen within the particles itself, because the particles come second, the waves come first. The wave becomes particle, and the only place where the waves can operate is within the mind as such. So quantum physics is a study of the subtle universe, and classical physics is a study of the gross universe. To summarize again, both science and Vedanta agree that matter exists as particle and waves, which both of them agree. Science must realize that the wave can exist in the mind only. It cannot exist in the particle universe as such. Quantum physics really is the study of the mind waves. Mind creates the gross universe and not the other way around. So just to conclude again, we see that the quantum physics need to understand your inner core. They need to understand what awareness is. It need to understand how the mind vrittis operate within the mind to really to come to the conclusion of how the waves function as such. So today we have discussed only one aspect of quantum physics and the mind as such. But in my book, Science Meets Vedanta, I've covered many different aspects which can be helped. Vedanta can help science in many different ways. For example, to understand the structure of space. Right now, science is quite confused how the space operates where does the space start from, where does the space end. They have very little understanding there. But if you understand your inner core, if you understand Vedanta, this question can be answered quite easily. The source of energy, science is quite, they do not understand where does the energy come from. But if they understand Vedanta and they apply the rules of science to Vedanta, you'll come to understanding where does the energy come from, the time, where does the time start from, and we can understand the theory of everything, the understanding motion, making up of objects, how are the objects made up, dark energy and dark matter. There's something which is unknown to science. But if we have understanding of Vedanta, many of these questions can be answered. Entanglement, another aspect of science, which science is mysterious about what entanglement is and how does it function. But once you understand the principles of Vedanta, this question can be answered. So all these different aspects we have covered in our book, Science Meets Vedanta. Lastly, I'll show you my book. It's called Science Meets Vedanta. It's available on Amazon. It's available as a Kindle version, a paper version, and a hardcover version. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for patiently listening to me, and I'm ready to answer any questions you may have. Vineet, I'm okay now. I've done. You can. Any questions are there?
I'm sure. If you can, why don't you let's take down the screen sharing.
Yeah.
And we can return to our regular view.
Yeah. So I should stop sharing. I've stopped sharing. Okay. No. Okay. Is that what you want? Or no? I need to. Okay. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. I need to do anything else, Vineet, or yeah.
No, that's great. So thank you so much. We're all really, really grateful. We do have a little bit of time. We're about 5 minutes or so. And we do have some questions that came in, both anonymous questions as well as questions that folks have raised that they may want to unmute themselves and kind of clarify their question if they'd like to. So if it's okay, Jayant, I'd like to just jump into the Q&A. Yeah. So before we kind of get into some of the content-specific questions, Satish has a question in terms of how the ideas that you're proposing have been received within the scientific community. And so Satish asks, have you been in touch with practicing active quantum physicists in the field who either agree with, partially agree with, or perhaps even push back against some of the kind of theories that you're sharing? And are these folks that are, have published any work in peer-reviewed scientific conferences or journals that can either substantiate or engage with some of the points that you've raised?
Yeah, actually, frankly, I've not interacted too much with scientists as such, but there have been people who have been following my blog, and a few scientists who have come back to me saying they completely agree with me. But then I have some classmates from my IIT who, without understanding the full concepts of Vedanta, sometimes you need to have an open mind what I'm proposing, that you need to have an open mind to understand your basic inner core. Once you understand your inner core, then many of the questions can be answered there. I'm trying to reach the physicists, and I'm very curious to meet physicists. In fact, I'm going to my IIT Kanpur on Wednesday. So I have set up a meeting with the physics department there. So I'm pretty new to the area of trying to contact scientists and those sort of areas. I'm very keen to interact with them. I would love to meet many more scientists and try to understand, try to convince them or try to explain what from the area from which I'm coming through.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll go next to an anonymous question. And this question asks, there is a famous Zen koan. If a tree falls in the forest and there is nobody there to hear it, does it make a sound? In Buddhism, this question is deemed to have no answer and is meant to help us to transcend the limits of the mind. But it sounds like you are suggesting that according to Vedanta, the answer is simply yes, and that it can be known by the mind. Is this true? And if so, is this one place that Buddhism and Hinduism might disagree on?
The way I would answer to that is that there's a wave function of everything. The tree falling down, there's a wave function there. So if you say the universe by itself is a wave function, it is definitely happening in the wave function. But unless and until it doesn't become a particle, you're not sure if sound is made or no. But there's a fully living universe in the wave world. There's a fully functioning universe in the wave function. In that, everything happens first there. If that part of it doesn't come in the presence of awareness, you will not know about it. But the sound has been updated there. The tree falling down is being updated there. The sound has been updated there. But if there's no one who's aware of it, you will not know if the tree is making sound or not. But there's a fully functioning universe in the wave world, basically. In that, nothing is missed out. Everything happens there first. Then some people may be aware of it. Some people will not be aware of it. If you're standing next to the tree, you will hear the sound. But if your awareness is not close to it, you will not hear the sound. But things are already happened in the wave world as such. I hope I have answered your question.
I hope so for our anonymous question asker. It seems like you are suggesting then that while it may or may not make a sound on the level of awareness, because of this kind of, as you said, this kind of perfectly self-aware universe, that on the level of waves, that there is indeed a sound.
Yes, that is recorded in the wave world as such.
The
wave world may not be the presence of awareness of that particular gentleman. So he will not know as he heard the sound or not heard the sound, because he's not there. His wave function is not interacting with the awareness to know the sound. But someone is standing next to the tree, he will hear the sound because his awareness, the wave function of the tree is within his awareness as such.
So just to kind of continue on this train of thought, or to say it perhaps another way, is there in fact a tree that we can speak of if there's no one there to observe it? And it sounds like you're suggesting there is, on the level of, as you said, in the wave world.
Yes, it is definitely there in the wave world. Everything functions in the wave world first, and then it happens in the physical world. If you see the physical world, there's nothing real there. All the objects in the real world are dated objects, because light takes a certain time to travel. And the tree you are seeing there in the real world may be now minus 10 raised to power minus 6 world. The sun you are seeing is an 8-minute-old sun. The moon you are seeing is a 3-second-old sun. The objects in front of you are certain time it takes light. So there's really no real object in the universe there. All is a projection of the wave into the particle world as such. Everything in the real objects are all in the form of waves. And then they collapse and to become particles as such.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to Joanne is with us, and Joanne has 2 questions. So perhaps I can ask both questions, and then Joanne, I want to invite you to unmute yourself if you'd like to expand on the question, or if you need any clarification. The first question is when, and I believe it's pronounced Kirlian, is that correct? When Kirlian photography photographs a person with the aura, are we looking at particle and wave in one? If not, what are we looking at? So this notion of aura photography. And then the second question is, are we the observer of the self?
Yeah, this self means, coming to the second part, the self, I'm not clear what she means by the self. Does it mean the ego? Or you are talking about the real observer within Satchidananda as such? Because the ego is also a thought, like any other thought. So the ego is really not the observer as such. It is the subject within the observer, which is really the seer of everything outside. And then the ego links it up with the observer, that subject, to think I'm the observer, I'm the thinker, I'm talking this I means the ego as such. So the ego has no no separate existence as such. It is dependent on the awareness to become aware of anything as such. And then about the photographic aura, I'm not clear exactly what you're talking about. The aura of around a person when you take a photograph, anything which you are taking the photograph of is a collapsing of a wave which is within the mind as such. So that image has been created in the mind first, and then it is projected out as the universe as such. So if there's an aura around in a photograph, that must have happened in the mind first, and then it is projected out as the universe. It's not an easy concept to explain, but it is very important to understand everything happens in the mind first, and that is projected out as the universe. And the universe is a dated objects. There's nothing now in the universe out there. Everything is like a recorded image coming out, because there's nothing now in the universe out there. Do I answer your question?
Well, so when we have in this picture, there'll be the picture of, let's say, the body, and then there'll be colors coming out all around the body. That's, I guess, waves that we can't perceive with our eyes, but that are there. But so are those waves, let's say, I guess it's the electromagnetic field. So is that the wave, or is that the particle world?
Everything outside is the particle world. There's nothing outside which is the wave world. Wave world is only within the mind as such. Because the particles, like I mentioned to you, a wave comes first, then you have a particle. So you can't have a particle and then a wave inside it as such. So the particle has to be outside in this space, and the wave part has to be within the mind. There's no other place for waves. Do not exist in this space, in the particle world at all. Because the wave comes first and then the particle as such. So the aura also, because since you're aware of the aura, so that itself is a particle then, because you're aware of the aura. So the aura is a particle, although I don't understand exactly what you mean by the aura, but I'm assuming that there's something around the mind or around the body which comes out. If you can see it, you're aware of it, definitely it's in the presence of your observer. So it's definitely a particle, or the aura is a particle, it's not a wave. The wave happens in the mind only.
So let's say radio waves, are those particles for the purposes of this discussion?
No, waves are, the radio waves are within the mind itself. And what you hear is the sound. For example, finally you see X-ray, or waves have some properties. It could be an X-ray, it could be radio waves. If it's a radio wave, the sound you hear is the final particle. The waves happen in the mind, and that has been projected out by the mind to become sound, which you may listen through a radio or through the TV. So the TV itself is a particle. So it has a wave property with all the different functionality, and that is within the mind. And then the mind projects the TV out with the sound and image, basically. So it's not an easy concept to understand, but that is what the truth is, basically. Because otherwise you will not find waves out there in the universe at all. Because the wave, you can't have the wave within the particle. The particle comes second. The wave has to have a different location. And since it cannot be in the space out there, it has to be within the mind. The mind is the only place where the waves can live and propagate.
So, Jayant, if I'm understanding correctly, if there is any manifestation in, as I believe you called it, the gross universe, whether visually, orally, once it is in any way, shape, or form externalized or manifest, by definition, it is now in particle form rather than wave form. Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Even if we conventionally use the vocabulary of wave, by that point, when we talk about, for instance, as in Joanne's question, when we talk about radio waves, or when we're looking at a photograph with showing through light spectrum what we might call an aura, because we're already experiencing it on the physical level, on the gross level, it is already in particle form.
Correct.
Is that right? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And the wave is always in the mind. It is complex. I've written an article in my book called Life is a Living Wave. Everything happens in the wave world first. Then it translates itself into a world of a gross world. And the gross world is like a recording. If you look around the world, you will not find anything real there. anything real means anything now, which is, it's always a recorded image. Is now minus 8 seconds, which is the sun. Now minus 3 seconds is the moon. The now minus the computer in front of you, it takes light about 10 raised to a minus second to reach you. So the computer in front of you also is not real. It is now minus 10 raised to minus seconds. So everything, the gross world is a recorded image as such. And what is happening in the mind is the now world. And it projects an universe like the sun, it projects out as now minus 8 seconds. Your mind is projecting it out. It's not an easy concept because it's something very different. But that, if you think about it, that's the only truth of the universe as such.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Joanne. It is, I think, certainly thought-provoking and in some sense quite a radical proposition, at least for many of us who perhaps are coming from a paradigm where, we're our concept of what is real and unreal is quite different than the paradigm that you're proposing. I want to be conscious of the time. We're already actually technically over time. So I'm just going to, I apologize, there's a number of questions we didn't have time for. I want to end on one final question. This is an anonymous question, and perhaps a bit of a controversial one, or one that we're going to open up a can of worms with. But anyway, here it goes. Let's close out with this question. And the question reads, where is the place for God in the observing system and observed system model that you spoke of? Is there a need for theism or belief in the existence of a supernatural creator or God in Vedanta?
The simple answer to that is God is that inner core within you. It has the power of knowing, the power of knower, the power of intelligence, the power of to become objects. That is the God within you. And if there was no ignorance comes in. If there was no ignorance, you would only have your inner core there. And because of ignorance, you have forgotten your inner core, that you have all this past. You project a universe outside there. And God and the inner core are exactly the same. The inner core within you with all those powers are within you. The power of knowing, the power of knower, the power of intelligence, the object, how to become objects, all are within you. And that is the real God, basically. And you need to discover that. And once you discover that, you discover everything. If you know your inner core, you know all the objects, you know what the objects are made of, you know exactly what is happening in the world there. Because the world is a reflection of what comes from inside you. And that's why I request scientists to have an open mind to understand your inner core as such. Once you understand your inner core properly, you will understand how the world functions and how the universe functions, and you will accept the world out there, and that it depends on your inner core as such. Your inner core is projecting the universe out there. I've covered all these things in my book, basically.
Well, thank you so much. I, in addition to the handful of questions that we unfortunately didn't get to, I think I have probably 20 or 25 questions just swimming around in my head right now, based on just what you just shared, and there's so much more to unpack, which in many ways I think is the highest compliment we can pay to a talk like yours, that it's generating and provoking thought and leaving us perhaps with a little bit of intentionally leaving us with a little bit of disruption and messiness and churning, and lots more questions to ask. So we thank you so much for joining us and for getting us thinking in that way. I want to encourage everyone to continue to ask those questions. And if you're inspired to, please, we put the link in the chat box. Go on to Amazon, pick up the book. It's a great read. I've read it myself, and super readable and accessible. Whatever your familiarity with Vedanta, whatever your familiarity with physics or science generally, it's just a very accessible, readable, thought-provoking book, and kind of expands on some of what we've touched on this evening. So again, on behalf of the Hindu Life Program and the Office of Religious Life at Princeton University, we want to thank you all for joining us, and we want to thank Jayant ji, our special guest speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Vineet. And if you have any questions that they can ask me, I can answer them. I'm not sure if there's any way they can communicate with me. I'm more than happy to answer those questions.
Wonderful. Well, Jayant, if it's okay, perhaps I can share your email address in the chat box.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. Or if
Perfect.
you'd like to, you can enter it into the chat box. Let me
No,
see.
you can share it. I'm not sure how to do it. If you can do that, I don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. Just give me 1 second, folks.
Let me see if I okay, chat box, let me add it. Let me see if I can add it.
Yep,
Okay,
I've got
I'm putting it.
Okay.
I'll put it. I'm putting it.
Okay, great. And Jayant, I know a couple of folks were wondering if you are comfortable making your PowerPoint available.
Yes.
So, of course, that's completely your decision, but perhaps some folks, if you would like materials or you'd like to further the conversation, please reach out to Jayant. He's put his email address into the chat box and is happy to be in touch with you. And Jayant, if you're comfortable doing so and you'd like to share your presentation, feel free to email it directly to folks who request it.
Definitely, I have no problem. I have no issues. I want to spread the knowledge around, so I'm more than happy to share my knowledge. That's my goal, basically.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your night. And Jayant, I know you're joining us from India, so your day is just beginning. Perhaps you've got some meditation and a round of golf awaiting you. So have a wonderful rest of your day. Everyone have a wonderful night and rest of your week. And we hope to see you in the next Hindu Life program, virtual or in-person event. Thanks, everyone.